Diabetes Connections is brought to you by the only ultra-rapid-acting inhaled insulin and by Dexcom, keeping you in control with an integrated system for diabetes management.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, the author of SixUntilMe, Kerri Sparling, isn't blogging anymore, but she's still looking for stories of connection and community built around conversation.
I think that's so cool that we seek those stories out instead of sitting at home and wringing our hands saying, what might happen? It might all be awful. It's like, it's going to be great. Let's go figure out how to get to that great.
For 14 years, Kerri helped me and thousands of others figure out how to get to that great. She put aside the blog in 2019. We're going to talk about her new book, what she thinks about the online community these days, and what's next. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I am always so glad to have you here. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. Quick housekeeping note. There will be no news this week, no episode on Friday. I am taking a long-delayed trip with my sister. We have not been away, just the two of us alone together, in a very long time. And I am going to take my time and enjoy it. I don't think I talk about her a lot on this show, but my sister and I are very close. She's just the best. The timing is a little tricky here. If you're listening to this episode the day it goes live, we are on that trip, or at least we should be if all is well. And my new book comes out in exactly 1 week. So things are a little busy, but it's all good. If you pre-ordered Still the World's Worst Diabetes Mom, your copy is on the way, and it should be to you by the end of the week or sooner, depending on where you live. It will be available on Amazon internationally and pretty much wherever you get your books online, November 1st. So it's a little funny that my guest this week is here to talk all about her book. Kerri Sparling was diagnosed with type 1 as a child when she was 7 years old. She started SixUntilMe, that is referring to 6 years before diabetes came along. She started that in 2005. It was the very beginning of blogging, not just diabetes blogging. There were maybe 3 or 4 bloggers at the time talking about type 1 diabetes. Within the next couple of years, there would be dozens. A few years after that, there were probably hundreds of people who at least tried out having a blog. Kerri wrote about diabetes 5 days a week for 14 years. And in May of 2019, she announced she would stop writing SixUntilMe. At the time, I talked to her about it. I will link up that episode if you haven't heard. And she shares more of her family's story and what went into that decision. But I wanted to talk to her because, yes, her book is out and it's called SixUntilMe, but there's more to it than that. You heard us talking about the great. Kerri has never been only about the positive. She's not a diabetes can't stop us kind of person. But I think that's why I and so many people have been drawn to what she writes. She's a great writer, but she's very honest and genuine and very authentic. I do miss her blog, but I am grateful for her friendship, and I'm really glad she wrote this book. For those of you who've known me and Kerri for a long time and have listened to the show for a long time, she stays on brand here. She is still one of only, 2, maybe 3 people in 520 shows that I have had to bleep out because of language. You will hear Kerri and me in our conversation in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Afrezza. Since starting this podcast, one of the highest interest topics has been Afrezza inhalable insulin. I am so excited to partner with them to tell you more. Afrezza is an ultra-rapid acting mealtime insulin. You breathe in using an oral inhaler. Once inhaled, Afrezza passes quickly through your lungs and enters your bloodstream in less than 1 minute and may start reducing blood sugars within about 12 minutes. Find out more and see if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium, and is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you've ever smoked, have ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you are pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on afrezza.com/safety. Kerri, welcome back. It's been a while. It's great to talk to you.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. Technical difficulties and all.
Well, you sound great now.
Thank you.
We're all good. As I said, it's been a while. I miss you. I do. Well, I miss you as a friend. I mean, we haven't seen each other in a while, but I miss you. I read your blog every day when you wrote Six Until Me. So I was really excited to get your book. Why'd you put the blog into a book?
I feel like that's a weird thing to do. And a lot of people are like, oh, you don't want to turn your blog into a book. But I really wanted to because I wanted my blog to stop being a blog. I felt like part of why I stopped writing was in pursuit of some privacy. And so taking the blog offline and putting selected posts and essays in the form of a book kind of helped me get a little more of a rein on the narrative in that way, especially as it pertained to my kids and their well-being. So that was always at the kind of front of my mind, and it dictated why the book was born from the blog, and the blog will be like burnt to the ground.
So really you're pulling it off, or it is offline?
It will be soon. Yeah, it's just a matter of scrubbing. And again, that's not because I'm not proud of anything that I've done in there. It's more, I feel like it's done, and to comb through the archives without context just doesn't work anymore.
That could be a whole show in and of itself. What an interesting thing to think about, how the rise of blogging and then changing to something else and then the archiving of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you think about I remember Amy Tendridge said to me years ago, I mean, truly like decades ago, saying, once published, forever public. And I was like, man, that really, really stuck with me because it's really true. All the odd thoughts that I decided to chronicle when I was in my early 20s are still on the internet for a while. I was like, this seems like a bad idea.
How did you decide which posts to put into the book?
I wanted to pick the ones that had the most evergreen to them, if that makes sense. It's more, because there was a lot of stuff at the beginning of blogging, especially as a community when we were getting to know one another. What did you do over the weekend? We used to do memes, but it was before memes were words posted over photos. It was when it was almost like a call and response of what's your favorite color, 5 favorite songs, 5 places you want to go, like that sort of back and forth. And we really got to know one another as a community. That stuff doesn't translate to a book from my perspective. You don't want to see 5 countries I wanted to visit when I was 26, when I wasn't leaving my house in Rhode Island. You know what I mean? So like stuff like that didn't make it, but things that talked about what it was like growing up with diabetes, things that talked about what it was like planning and pursuing a pregnancy with diabetes. And then the things about, what it's like to manage food thoughts and friend thoughts and relationship thoughts. That stuff seems like it stands the test of time more than I went to New York over the weekend. That just didn't seem to fly.
But I'm curious, like because I just did this for my book, going through blogs and social media posts. It's like looking through photo albums. It's fun in a way that you can't really share with everybody else. Did you have that too?
It was like spinning through an old diary, only it was creepier because it was an old diary. Lots of people had read. So that made it decidedly different. It was really nice to go back and look at old posts and say, this is what I felt being part of this community. And it was so interesting to me to see that I still felt that way. Like writing 15, 17 years ago, the DOC is so important to me. I'm like, well, damn it, it's still important to me now. And I was glad that had longevity, those feelings, those ties to the community. So that felt really good.
Before we go further with the book and with the blog, can I catch people up on what's up with you these days? As much or as little as you want to share, to catch readers and the DOC up on kind of where's Kerri now?
Sure. And that's so weird too, because when we were all writing regularly, like several times a week, we didn't have to ask one another offline, hey, what have you been up to? Because we could just log on to people's online diaries and check out what they'd been up to. But when I stopped blogging actively in 2019, that was in pursuit of, like I said, privacy. But also I wanted to really spend time with my kids. And so that was it was the middle of 2019. And then we had this really interesting pandemic experience in early 2020. And so that really sucked my attention away from everything other than my immediate family and the health of everyone living in my house. And so that micro focus made me miss blogging less because I was missing everything at that point. It was like, I missed people, faces, outside, the whole mess. So I'm glad that we are past that acute phase of things now and doing our best to move forward with everything. But kind of coming out of that has made me so interested in fiction because I was really tired of reality. And so it's been exciting, because to spend years and years writing about the disease I was living with, the actual life I was living, that's therapeutic and good in its own right. But to be able to step entirely outside of what was really happening and put a completely fictional lens on things, that was so exciting in a completely new and different way for my writer brain that I've been kind of deeply immersed in that. And just before we had gone on, I was telling you, my computer was glitching before we logged on. And I forgot to upload my work. And then my screen was spinning. And I was like, no, this thing I've been working on. And it's not like I can go back and say, well, I remember what happened that day. I'm like, no, I made that up. So I have to remember what I made up. So it's like, it's a whole new writing journey. It's a whole new exciting place to put my brain. And I'm really into it. So I'm doing that a lot. And I'm spending a lot of time with my kids and my husband. My daughter is 12 and a half. My son is, he's 6. They're both in school. My husband and I are both still writing full time for our respective jobs. So there's a lot of words flying around this house. Some of them curse words, but that's okay.
I hate to ask this question of a writer, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there a timeline? Is there a book coming? When can we read your stuff?
I hope soon, but I have to get it out first before other people can take it in. And writing online as a first-person narrative about living with diabetes really got me trained well, I think, to write in first person, all about myself. The arrogance is really deep. But to change my tone, to change my perspective in a literary sense, has taken some rework in how I approach my writing. And so it's going slower than I had hoped it would be going. But when I look back at what I've written, I'm like, I feel proud of this so far. So once I am at a place where I feel like I'm ready to submit it and work with agents and et cetera, that's going to be really exciting and awesome. But I need to take it at the pace that it wants to go at. And I don't want to force anything. So timelines before I'm dead.
Great answer.
Thanks.
Great answer. You're welcome. We've already said DOC, Diabetes Online Community, which is kind of what we used to call it. I guess we still can call it that. We've already said it several times. So you haven't blogged since 2019, and we haven't been out. I mean, because of COVID, things have changed so much. How do you stay connected these days? Because you said that that's still really important to you.
It is. And what I've found that text threads, group texts in a weird way, have become a more intimate sort of experience instead of having conversations that everyone online could read. It's nice to just connect with friends one-on-one or a couple at a time and check in with one another, especially during when everyone was home so much. It was nice to have those community touch points because as much as I love Rhode Island and living here, it is a small place. And the diabetes community here is not the one that I felt most connected to and saw regularly. So a lot of my friends are across the country, across the world. And so being able to connect with them without a blog through texting and Facebook messaging, et cetera, like that's been really important to me because it also reinforced the fact that these people weren't just people that lived on the internet and we hung out because of our pancreases. They were super decent human beings. And I'm honored to be friends with them. And I want to make sure that those friendships continue and grow and flourish,
The conversation about diabetes online doesn't seem to have changed that much in terms of what people are looking for, connection, comfort, information. But the way in which people share is so different than when you and I first entered the community, back in 2005, 2006. You don't have to say any names or anything like that, but do you follow people on Instagram? Do you look at the pretty pictures and the good lighting and it's so different.
I love that you drop your voice in a whisper. Like, do you look in the windows? Of course I look in people's windows. That's what people do on the internet. You creep on them. But I think that Instagram and the more visual platforms for sharing diabetes have been really interesting to me as a spectator, not as much as a participant. And I think that's because I've just never felt as comfortable putting my physical self out there. I felt a lot more comfortable leading with my words. And so the transition of having it be very visual hasn't been one that I've been as comfortable, following. But there are a lot of people that I watch. What I see a lot of are people saying, I need help. And sometimes it's specific. Sometimes it's like, I don't have enough insulin. I need CGM sensors. I need some kind of hardware or software, and the community rising to the occasion to make sure that people have what they need. That's not different from what was going on when we were blogging, but it's a lot more forward facing. And I hope those people are safely doing that and safely connecting. But I find it really encouraging to see that our community takes care of each other. I think that's really important. That's been thematic the whole time that I've been aware of a diabetes online community. It's nice to see that thread continues.
Yeah, it sure does. It's the biggest thing that happens in my local group. I run a very large group of parents in the Charlotte area, and we help each other in lots of intangible ways, but almost every week somebody is bringing something physical to someone else.
Sure.
And, that just unfortunately shows how kind of crappy the system is, that we can't get everything we need, but it shows how great the community is.
Yeah, right. It's weird to be so proud of the way we respond to something that's so crappy. That's an odd mush together.
But back to kind of the visual of it all, one of the things that I struggle with, and you and I talked about this very briefly offline, was I don't like to be, I'm on Instagram. I kind of have to be for the show. I do visual stuff, but I struggle with the fact that, I'm getting older, right? There's not a lot of people who are showing age in all of these beautiful photos. So I'm wondering, where do I fit? And I bring that up just to ask, you're younger than me, but I know, but with diabetes, I feel like it's one of these topics that I wanted to read your blog about getting older with diabetes. And you're still on the young side for it, because I've got lots of people in the podcast group who are, over 75, over 85, who really want to talk about these issues. I'm curious, Are you too young for that? Has your mind kind of started working in that direction already?
It's weird because I started, I don't know if it's weird, actually probably makes perfect sense. So when I was diagnosed, my clinicians and sometimes my parents a little bit would be hesitant to talk about what 40 and older would look like because they really didn't have a good grasp on it.
Wow.
They didn't know how the disease would manifest in my body, how care would progress, et cetera, et cetera. What has been such a nice thing is that it's progressed gently. And I don't feel unwell at the age of 43. I feel pretty good. And I'm really proud of the fact that I've lived for 36 years with type 1 diabetes. And I still feel like I can function exceptionally well. I do all kinds of stuff that everybody else does, and diabetes becomes a generalized blip on that particular radar. But I feel like it's difficult to talk about aging with diabetes, first of all, because I didn't think I was going to have the honor of being able to do it in the first place. And then second of all, people, generally speaking, gravitate towards younger people in terms of being drawn to them. You know what? That actually might be bullshit. And you might want to actually even edit that out. But if you don't, make sure you include the bullshit part, because there's no reason why all people with diabetes shouldn't be represented.
Right.
Color, race, creed, beliefs, age, the whole mess. And so I feel like I would like to read about people who were planning their marriages and then planning their pregnancies. And now I want to hear about people planning their perimenopause. And I'd like to hear them talking about what it's like to have old age or aging concerns in conjunction with long-term diabetes concerns. These are things that interest me. And like you were saying in your podcast group, where you have a lot of people who are of, 75, 85 years old, I want to hear from those people because it both gives me hope and also gives me community in knowing that it is normal to age. It is good to age. It is a friggin' honor to age, especially if you're dealing with diabetes. And that was kind of a question mark when you were diagnosed. So I want more vocalized stories about that sort of thing, because it's the same hope that I want now that I had when I was younger, saying, man, I wish I could read about people talking about being pregnant. Well, now I want to read about people talking about being old. It brings that same sort of peace to what my future might look like.
It is incredible because, when we think about aging with diabetes, I think we are just beginning to pivot from stories about, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. This person diagnosed in the 1940s or 1950s is amazingly still alive.
Right.
To, now the stories are, all right, we got to talk about menopause. We've got to talk about, Medicare. And then what does assisted living look like with diabetes? Right. Stories that I think people did not think would ever happen.
Right. And not with such veracity. Like it's happening to so many of us now. Just again, like pregnancy was happening to so many of us, and we were so grateful for that. Well, now we're all becoming old bags, and I'm grateful for that too. And I feel like there's still community that needs to be built around that conversation.
Again, we could do a whole show on it. I hope to do more shows on it, actually, because I do think it's so important. And it's one of those things that, again, I look at Benny. Mm-hmm. And he's, I was interested when he was 2 in the toddler stories. And then I wanted, to learn more about middle school. And now I'm desperate for all the college stories.
Right. I think that's so cool that we seek those stories out instead of sitting at home and wringing our hands saying, what might happen? It might all be awful. It's like, it's going to be great. Let's go figure out how to get to that great.
Yeah. All right. A couple of questions about your posts.
Okay.
Does your mother still call your CGM the GPS?
Probably. I try not to ask her about it because it's historically frustrated me.
You were very careful, and I admired this and adopted this a little too late, though. You were very careful about your children's privacy, and I learned a lot from that. Are you happy with how you did it? You always had nicknames. You were very careful.
I'm happy with how I did it. You could ask me that about their privacy on the internet. You can also ask me about that in terms of how I've parented them in general. I don't know.
Yeah.
If it's been good or bad. This being a mom, and now being a mom to 2 kids of pretty substantial age difference, I feel like I am repeatedly screwing stuff up and learning stuff every single day. And that shocks me to my core, because I thought, like, when I look at the other parents who are doing school pickup or meeting their child at the bus, et cetera, I'm like, do they know what they're doing? Because I'm not sure if I do. And then I wonder if they look at me, do they think I know? And I'm pretty sure they don't think I do. But like, I didn't realize that adulthood is the same kind of journey as becoming an adult. And I find that exciting too, to realize that we're all flailing beautifully together. So I hope that I protected my children's privacy in a way that serves them well. I also have no regrets about deciding to keep certain things offline, to keep their names offline. It's not like they don't have names. It's just I felt like Google shouldn't be given them yet. It was just, I don't know. It was paranoia that served me well, I think.
Yeah. I have started saying that parenting has no finish line, and you never know. You never get your trophy, right? You never know if you did it right. It's like, here's your medal. Congratulations. Move on.
Yeah.
As my kids are older, it's like, oh, this doesn't end? What? I've got to keep worrying? I'm worrying more? Come on.
But I feel like it becomes categorical worry. Like now you're worrying about college, and just all the categories just shift over and over. And that's, again, going back to talking about aging with diabetes. We are aging with them. And so I want all of these discussions to be happening at the same time so that we can learn all this stuff, because it's super important and really makes me nervous.
You were always very open, speaking about privacy, about how you taught your children about your diabetes. And I remember reading about your daughter helping you or being patient in the car, things like that. Has that evolved? Is she still, I guess interested is not the right word because it's just part of your life, but anything to share about how your kids look at it now?
Well, it's interesting to me because of their age difference that my daughter, who is 12 and a half, has a lot more of a sense of what, like if I don't have a very symptomatic low blood sugar, she still understands what's going on in a mechanical way. She knows that I have too much insulin. She knows that food is required. She knows what could happen if it goes untreated. And she side eyes me the same way that my husband does and my mom used to. And so my son, who is 6, doesn't have that same scope on it. He knows that I beep occasionally, and sometimes the beep he will hum along to because it's a high beep and we're not panicked about that. But if it's a low beep, he does get very concerned and wants to know if I need anything or will want to go and get me something. And so he's still learning what my reaction, I guess he's like tailoring his reactions to what my reactions are. And I'm grateful that my son is growing up with me having access to something like an automated semi-closed loop, et cetera, because the lows are less severe. I know my daughter saw more low blood sugars that were more dramatic, I guess, or more substantial. And that we've talked about that a little bit, she and I. It never seems to have scared her, but it does seem to have left an impression that we always want to make sure we have snacks, right? Question mark. But it's not so much a question mark as a period. Like, bring your snacks, mom. Yeah.
I can't ask about your kids without asking you this. Almost everybody I know who has type 1 diabetes and has children is worried about them developing it at some point. I don't mean to dwell on something that is kind of scary for a lot of people. You had to have had those discussions. Is this something that you still think about?
I think you said the phrase, I know people are always worried about their kids, and the sentence could have ended there, right? So adding about diabetes, about them climbing a tree and falling out, about, I mean, you name the concern thought that could bubble in. I'm a super anxious person. I am thinking all the bad things and trying to shove them out of my head. I remember when my daughter was really little, she asked me if I was glad that she didn't have diabetes. And it was a really awkward question because I felt like my answer had to be very nuanced and that I didn't want her to think I was glad she didn't have it, which equated to, but my life sucks because I do. I wanted to make sure that we didn't bridge all the way to that. I wanted to be like, I'm glad you don't because it's an inconvenience. It's a pain in the ass. Like, I wanted to minimize some of the things that I think about it, but I also didn't want her view of me to be minimized because I had it. And so we always used to tell her, and we've also told my son, we don't want you to get it. We will not be thrilled if you get it, but we're also not expecting you to get it. And if you were to get it, we know what to do. We are informed. We are privileged to have access to a lot of the things that would make life easier for them in terms of medication and insurance. And also, we have a community that can support us on that journey, one that didn't exist when I was diagnosed under my mother's care. And so we try, it's like this weird parenting dance of, I mean, we do it with all kinds of other things, right? Like, Mom, tell me about climate change. I'm like, you have to tell your kids what the information that they're looking for. You don't want them to lose sleep over it, but you also want them to be informed. And that is such an odd line to walk with something that they see every day, specifically with my diabetes. But the thing I try to reinforce for them is, do I seem happy? They're like, yeah. Do I seem like I like my life? Do I love my life? Do I love my family? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well then there's our focus, right? Whether you make insulin or not. I don't know what else to do with it.
No, that's always been my reaction to parents who are worried about this is, well, my kid has type 1 and I knew nothing. And he's like, I like him. He's a pretty cool kid. He has a pretty good life. Like, I mean, it stinks and I'd love to take it away from him, but that's about all you can do. Although when I talk to my daughter about it, she's like, yeah, no, thanks.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing. Like, I wonder if my kids, when they get older, will ask me the more emotional questions, like, how heavy does this weigh on you at this point and that point? I don't know how honest I'll want to be. They're going to listen to this eventually. I don't know how honest I'll want to be in those moments, though, because I don't want them to ever think that this has been something not worth trying my best at,
Yeah, and that's again, that's a parenting thing. As they grow up, you talk to them differently.
Right.
I mean, this is a very silly example. I was very strict about language when my kids were younger. I'm like, no cursing, no foul language, no bad language. What might be a curse in my house was probably just slang in somebody else's house. And boy, have we loosened up. I have an almost 18 and almost 21-year-old, and we address each other now with words that would never have flown in this house.
Exactly. And I see that with the age difference in my kids. My daughter, I can say certain things in front of her and we try things out. My son, when he overhears a curse word and we're like, well, what word did you hear on the bus? And he'll lean in all conspiratorially and say, can I get a pass? I'm like, you want a pass to say the word? He's like, yeah, I want a pass to say the word. And so we let him say the word. And he gets this like gleeful square in his shoulders because he got to say crap, you know?
Oh my God. When Benny was little, for diabetes stuff, for things that hurt, for inset changes or, infusion set changes or whatever, we would say, you can say, this is so funny to think about. You can say all the potty words you want. That's what we called them, right? And he would literally yell potty words. And now he's almost 18, he's 6 feet tall. And he will, as a joke sometimes, be like, poop or whatever. Like, it's just so silly.
I think that's amazing, though. It's like, burn that rage off. Get it out. Do it.
Exactly.
From it. But I think it's great.
Oh, my
gosh.
Me well,
I'm a huge proponent of curse words, but I just won't use them readily in a public setting. But I do love them.
Hey, before I let you go, and now I have to look for the potty words in your book, but before I let you go, when I was writing my books, I pulled a lot from my blogs, but I was kind of concerned about, people have read them. Mm-hmm. So did I want to put them in a book? Why did you, I guess to put this delicately, Kerri, I have read this blog, right? So why would I buy this book?
Well, you're my friend, so I'm hoping you'll buy the book anyway.
I already bought it.
But aside from the guilt factor of that is that I think that, we talked about it a bit earlier, I think that diabetes has some really just common things that most people living with it experience, and they stand the test of time, these discussions do. And so a lot of the essays that are in the book, whether they've been read by other people before online, have not been read by the people who are currently out there looking for this information now. And so I feel like these standalone essays have a chance to serve a community that hasn't been exposed to them yet. And they also stand as an archive as to what we used to talk about back in the day and what kind of translates out to, here in 2022. And I feel proud of that. Like when you looked through your book and you were looking through your posts, I know we hit on this a bit earlier, but weren't you like, man, we still talk about the emotional burden of a high blood sugar. Yeah. We still talk about how scary that low was. We still talk about how unnerving it can think to wonder where your next insulin injection can come from. Like these are still things that we talk about now. And there's something about going back almost 20 years and seeing that we're still having these same discussions now that's very humanizing for the whole community and becomes something that could help unite us, not the book itself, but just these discussions and their common threads.
I do love the idea, and we are friends, but I do love the idea of newer diagnosed families who don't know SixUntilMe, who haven't gone to your website, picking up this book and having the same experience that I did back in 2006 when Benny was diagnosed and finding this and thinking, this person speaks to me, this person gets it. This is not an alarmist or victim look at diabetes. This isn't a clinical look at diabetes. This isn't a lived experience. Yeah, nope. But it is. It's a lived experience with diabetes that I'm thumping around here because it really helped me. And it's kind of hard to say that right to you, to say thank you. But I remember where I was at specific times of reading your blog. I mean, it's just wild to think about. And I love the idea of newer families finding it now.
Well, thank you for that, first of all. But in addition, the bloggers that I read when I was starting to look for my community, like Scott Johnson and Amy Tenderich, Nicole Purcell wrote a beautiful blog. A woman named Violet wrote a blog that just changed my life, even just for its fewer posts. There were people out there who were sharing their stories in a way that made me feel so much less alone. And like there was so much more hope baked into my future. I didn't know that was missing. And that, like when I look back at that sort of stuff, I wish that there were archives of what they have written in a way that I could bring in on a trip with me, or something that I can just thumb through and dog ear out of love. And so as much as I am very proud to have put my posts and my essays in a book so that people can do that with, I wish that more people would do that, because to have these narratives lost to either idleness or just archiving not working out, or people not stumbling onto them the way that we used to, I feel like that's such an important thing to hang on to. These stories are so important, all of them, everyone's story. I really feel strongly about that.
Well, Kerri, thank you so much for doing this. Thanks for talking to me. Thanks for writing the book. And I can't wait to see what's next. Thanks.
Thank you for having me. Please edit out any curse words. Thanks.
No chance.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information about Kerri and her book at diabetes-connections.com. Just click on the episode homepage for this episode. And Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. One of the most common questions I get is about helping children become more independent, right? How did we do it? Benny was diagnosed at 2. He's now almost 18. What did we learn? Well, those transitional times are really tricky. Elementary to middle, middle to high school. I mean, you know what I mean. Using the Dexcom really makes a big difference for us. It's not all about share and follow, although that's helpful. Think about how much easier it is for a middle schooler to just look at their Dexcom rather than do 4 to 5 finger sticks at school, or for a second grader to just show their care team the number before gym. At one point, Benny was up to 10 finger sticks a day, and not having to do that makes his management a lot easier for him. It's also a lot easier to spot the trends and use the technology to give your kids more independence. Find out more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. As I said toward the beginning of the show, pre-orders of Still the World's Worst Diabetes Mom are in the mail. So if you ordered one, it's on the way. When you get it, please share it. Tell other people about it. I mean, unless you hate it, and then you can keep that to yourself. But the book will go into wide release. That means on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Target, wherever you get your books online, November 1st. I will be having some episodes about this, but I promise the podcast is not going to be the book. I know that these two audiences are not exactly the same. I know not everyone who listens is a parent of a child of type 1, or even if you are, you may not be interested in my book, and that's fine. So while there will be an episode or two coming up that's pretty much book-centric, we will be back on the technology beat and some other really interesting stories coming up. End of the year usually means a couple of FDA approvals. I'm hearing some rumblings of companies that are getting ready. Nothing to report yet, but we will stay on that. So I guess all of that to say a huge thank you to those who are supporting the book and are waiting for that message. And a thank you to those who are not, because this podcast is not just for parents. And I want to make sure that I'm serving everybody the best that I can. All right. Thank you to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. No newscast this week, but I'll be back next week with a new episode. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.